Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week, it is going to be the turn of the guitarist and songwriter. It is the one and only Tommy Stinson, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love and poetry and much more. Anyway, one of the original members of The Replacements, went on to a prolific solo career, as well as working with bands such as Guns N' Roses and Soul Asylum, was in other bands including Bash and Pop and Perfect, and has a new solo album that has just come out, well, quite recently, which also features on guitar Chip Roberts. The album is titled Cowboys in the Campfire. Available from all good record shops and also probably online. I will give you the link in the notes below. But this is the interview, so after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to that exciting subject was the for early formative years. Tommy, it's over to you.
Wow. I used to sleep with the AM radio on in my closet when I was a kid. As far back as I can remember, and it had the oldie station on. So anything that was popular from the late 50s to the 60s is what the radio station would be playing. I always had it in my closet with the door open, so I could always hear it when I was going to sleep at night. I don't know exactly why I did that, except that I liked it for whatever reason. And really, I think, when my brother came home from, he was kind of put in a boys' reform situation for a couple of years there when I was like 10. I think when I came out of that, I think he came home and got turned on to like Johnny Winter,
right?
And a lot of that sort of blues rock stuff, and things like Yes, like I'm 10, 11 years old, I'm talking about here, listening to like Yes records and all this prog rock stuff. But it really wasn't until I met my buddy David Roth, not the David Lee Roth, but David Roth, this little friend of mine that I had in high school, where I got turned on to punk rock. He had been to England. He had been to England with his family at an early age and got turned on to punk rock when he was over there with his sisters and family and stuff. So he kind of turned me on to like the Clash and other things of that nature. The Jam and stuff like that, probably when I was 12, I suppose, 12, 13 in there.
Yes.
And I was already playing bass with the Replacements, so all this stuff was all kind of new to me. And I think my first real record purchase that I got turned on to really would have been London Calling.
Right, a classic of our time. Were your parents at all musical or had some cultural interest in life?
Not really. I mean, my mom had a bunch of, had interest in like country music, like Conway Twitty. Elvis Presley was one of her favorites.
Right.
And she wasn't a Beatles fan. She was a Beach Boys fan.
Right.
We lived in San Diego, California until I was about 6 months old or so. But my mom had spent enough time in the San Diego area that was really her thing. She wasn't a Beatles fan, but like Beach Boys. And
right.
So growing up, her record collection really was, just kind of country music and stuff. So
yes, interesting.
Yeah.
And what about your dad? Was he ever into music? Did he ever sort of have any passion?
I didn't have him around. We left him when I was probably 6 years old. We left him in Florida.
Right.
Yeah. He was a rotten bastard and, died as such. Like grim as that all is.
That is a slightly, but it's interesting because I had a brother who was 7 years older than me, and he was ripe for the prog rock world of Yes and Genesis and Wishbone Ash, Barclay James Harvest, all that kind of stuff. So yeah. I used to sneak into his little room and used to get these records and play them when I was quite young, thinking, "God, this is fascinating," And I suppose I'd never heard anything like it before, and also being forbidden to listen to them made it even more interesting. So I do have a strange kind of. Yes, deeply embedded in my DNA is the work of Yes and Genesis for Mike, and
All
even
that stuff.
and even the solo work of Rick Wakeman, which is quite bizarre. But I can't get it out. It's just there for life. But it's kind of interesting. So, what made you kind of want to play a guitar when you were about 11? What was the kind of catalyst for that moment?
Well, my brother saw me, kind of manhandling his bass guitar, and he asked me if I wanted to play it, and I was like, sure. And we sat down, and he showed me for a second. I was like, no, I don't want to do this. It hurts my fingers. So, cut to him, kind of making me play it. He was like, no, you're going to play this. I'll buy you a candy bar. I'll buy you a Coke, whatever. Sit and play. So he kind of bribed me in a way, with snacks from the store and stuff like that. And I got into it. I persevered.
Yes.
He pushed, and it got to a point where, okay, I started to get into it, and I started enjoying it, and I think it wasn't long before, we were playing with other people in the neighborhood that, we'd come across, people in our neighborhood that were, played instruments, like Chris Mars, the drummer for the Replacements and stuff. He lived a couple blocks away from us. So pretty quickly we were, here I am, 11. I picked up the bass, at 10, 11 years old, playing by the time I'm 12 with other people, and, jamming and playing parties and stuff, 12, 13 years old. And, playing kegger parties at that outdoor backyard beer parties and stuff like that, at an early age, realizing, wow, people seem to really like this stuff that we're doing up here. So it made it it got in my head real early on that, the price of admission is, people like what you're doing. So that's kind of fun. And so, at an impressionable age of, 12, 13 years old or whatever, it was it kind of sewed the deal for me.
It was a no-brainer, really, wasn't it?
Yeah. No, people like what I'm doing. That's cool. And it got me out of all it diverted my attention away from being the hoodlum that I was at that point, because I'd already been to jail 3 times by the time I was 10 before he came home and showed me how to play bass. So, I was already in a bad path before that. So
yes. So wait a minute. Did you say your brother had also gone to reform school and then?
Yeah. He got in some trouble early on when we moved up from Florida, and he tried to put sugar in my mom's boyfriend's gas tank of his car. He didn't like him. Didn't really like being in Minnesota either, but he acted out, and they put him away for a couple of years.
Yes. And what was your kind of curious? What was your kind of crimes that you managed to commit?
I was a hoodlum, I was stealing bikes, breaking into houses, doing all kinds of stupid shit just to kind of, I guess, killing time, finding something to do. Wasn't a whole lot of parenting happening in my household.
No, there you go. So did you manage to leave school at 16, or had you already flown that nest?
It was in the middle of my 10th grade. Yeah, 16 years old when I walked away from it. My mom had signed guardianship papers to our tour manager friend, Peter Jesperson. And I, signed away basically so that I could go across state lines with the band at 16 years old. So we did that. I dropped out in the middle of 10th grade and didn't look back.
Yes, and during that period, it's kind of interesting musically. I know this is a bit UK based, but we had that punk world, then post punk, and then that kind of early 80s. There was bands like, I suppose, Simple Minds, U2, Big Country. In like 83, we suddenly had the Smiths, who were a massive part in my life. So, were there any particular bands that you were thinking, not copying, but slightly influenced by at that stage?
I pretty much during those years was kind of following suit with my buddy David Roth, and we were listening to, like I said, The Jam, The Clash, Buzzcocks, all the punk rock stuff from the late 70s, early 80s. And then when it started to kind of veer off was when we met Peter Jesperson. Peter Jesperson was sort of my musical guru, still is for all practical purposes, my musical guru. He would turn me on to everything from Bob Dylan to Captain Beefheart, David Bowie to, Kate Bush. I mean, just the whole spectrum of things, save for jazz music. He turned me on to everything. that was outside of what I was already into. And so I got influences pretty early on for things that way outside of the punk rock realm and that kind of thing. So I had a pretty diversified, musical sense at 14 years old, 15 years old. I was kind of all over the place,
Yes.
and was really getting into not so much the idea of like punk rock or whatever, but more into the music part of it rather than the aesthetic and the idea behind it and all that. And what I really kind of gravitated towards was really, just solid songwriting. That kind of really was the thing for me that I got into early on.
Absolutely. Because Peter was he the owner of Twin Tone Records?
He was one of them, yeah. Yeah.
Right. And was that kind of a major sort of place in sort of, was it Minneapolis that you were?
Yeah. So he worked at Twin Tone Records was a small little record company that had offices in Minneapolis, but he always worked also, his day job was working at Orfolk Jokopus Records, which was where we brought our first demo tape to him and stuff. So, that's kind of, there was a corner in Minneapolis called 26th Street and Lindell Avenue where all the musicians and everyone kind of converged, at this one record store to buy their latest wares and, get turned on to new music.
That's yes. So because the first album you recorded opens with "Taking a Ride," doesn't it? Which is well, can you remember when that came together? Because that's an amazing song. It's got an urgency to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, certainly. When Paul, joined the band, he was pretty ripe for, wanting to write songs and stuff like that. He'd been playing around, kicking around with other people in the neighborhood before we got to him. But, it wasn't long before he joined our band. We kind of were already a band when he kind of joined us, and we kind of, streamlined it down to him being the singer and the guitar player and stuff. And we're starting to write songs pretty much right out of the gate. Jeeps, I must have been 12 when we, moved from one end of town to the other, and we were already playing a lot of that first record, a lot of that stuff in the basement. It all came up pretty quick.
Yes, and did you feel that chemistry with the kind of the four of you?
Yeah, we bonded pretty quick, and I think it was kind of, I think more at Paul's sort of, what he brought to the table was, he kind of rallied us together in a way, in an unspoken sort of way. I think what we saw in him, I think, was just that he seemed to have his shit together and seemed to be kind of, on a level of wanting to do something that we were kind of just getting into, like, yeah, we want to do this thing. We want to go out and play and, play shows and be a band. So as soon as that came together, the songs just started to kind of flow out of him in a way. And, and we would just hack them out, hack them out right there in the spot. We didn't really, I suppose there was lots of, vocal takes, I suppose, in the studio, but a lot of the records that we recorded pretty much live in the studio, except, save for vocals because of the sound quality and stuff like that. We had to kind of overdub those things, but we didn't really spend a whole lot of time really monkeying around. It's, not like people do today.
No,
that kind of thing.
It doesn't. I think when the chemistry is there and the stars have lined up, things do just happen without you really thinking about it until later on and wonder how it all happened. But
yeah,
it's just,
and then you got people growing quicker than others, in that group. And I think there was a lot of that happening. I think my brother and him really butted heads in a positive way in a lot of things. I think that Bob had a hard time, wanting to give up the reins of the leader of the band kind of thing to him. But it was clear that Paul was a singer. He could play and write songs, and so he already brought that to the table.
Yes,
that I think he kind of led us to where we ended up.
And did you have a kind of curiosity when you saw people like Greg Norton sort of playing with Husker Du? Did you? Can you remember the first time you saw them play?
I do, and I wasn't really the hugest fan of them. we all used to play together. We used to all just kind of hang out together, play together, go to same, house parties and shit after shows and all that. And there was, someone was asking me about this recently. It was the Minneapolis scene back then was very, very vibrant. Nothing like I've ever seen since. But, or there's nothing that I've seen nothing like it since, is what I meant to say. There, all these bands with all these different influences and different, flavors all kind of came together and fed off each other one way or the other. We would listen to each other and either get off on each other's music or just go the opposite direction because we didn't like their music or whatever. But it was very vibrant and very much, sort of a whole scene that was super special. I mean, the bands that came out of that were awesome. But I never was that huge of a fan of Husker Du. I mean, we liked them and appreciated them because they were kind of doing the same thing we were doing, which was just hustling to be a band and get gigs and play shows and stuff like that. We all had that in common,
Yeah, absolutely. And did I know, because from the UK, we obviously get really romanticized about parts of America, but obviously Prince is just another person in the city. Did that sort of ever, did you ever go and see Prince live and think, blimey, that's quite interesting?
Yeah, I saw him play, a few different times. I think everyone saw him play at different times. I don't remember any of us being together and watching Prince at any one point. But what was cool about it and the whole scene really was that even he was part of what we were all doing. Not because he was famous, but it was a strange unspoken thing. Everyone in our city that was in a band, a musician, everyone, was feeding off of each other one way or the other, whether musically or scene wise or hanging out or friends and all this stuff. It was a very tight knit kind of camaraderie and healthy competition. I mean, everyone was competing with the same crowd because that's, a lot of us it took a while for all of us to slowly get out of town and play shows outside of Minneapolis, but everyone fighting for the same crowd in a way. It led to a lot of sort of cross-pollination of sounds and aesthetics and things like that I made it really super special. And when I look at it now and I think about it, there's just so many memories that I have of just certain things that happened that were super special and that you would only really understand if you were there.
Yes, I would imagine a zeitgeist moment, really, in that sort of moment, isn't it? Really, I guess.
Yeah.
So when you came to record Let It Be, what was the atmosphere like with the band at that stage? Was there still sort of, was it still feeling like things were going well, or were there kind of
we were starting to play out of town and starting to draw crowds and stuff like that. Small, albeit small, but we were getting somewhere. And we knew we were growing something. We knew we were, we were doing something that people liked. I mean, that was basically it. People were buying our records. And for a small label as Twin Tone was, everything was going in the right direction. So by Let It Be, there was a confidence there, I think, in what we were doing. We'd already been playing lots of stuff with, doing shows with REM, things like that, while they were kind of blowing up. So it was a lot of, kind of building. I think the one thing at that point that kind of really kind of screwed with us a bit was just that we were still sort of, God, how do I put it? Sort of an awkward bunch where, and to put it simply, where other bands that were coming up at the same time, be it REM or REM would be I'll just keep it at that. REM, things like that. Other bands that we were coming up with were getting more successful because they were able to play the game better. They were able to, talk to the adults that were selling the records on the record company side of things. They were able to shake hands with the executives and all that stuff. We just couldn't get that part down, so much so I think that we shot ourselves in the foot in a lot of ways, but it also was part of our thing. It was part of we didn't want to be part of the establishment, even though we wanted to sell records and we wanted to play for more people.
Yes.
It was kind of, and when you get in that mindset, that's how you end up like a band like the Replacements. It's like you don't want to conform, you don't want to be part of this thing that everyone's doing. The MTV thing was really kind of repugnant to us in a way, making these videos when you're pretending to play your song and pretending to play a show. It's like, what the hell is that? Like, really went to, make our first video kicking and screaming. I mean, really just wasn't our thing. But that said, where all the other bands were getting good at that and playing the game, REM, succeeded and, I think well beyond us because of that. In a way, we weren't able to really conform in a way that was detrimental.
Yes, it was quite tricky because I know the Clash wouldn't go on Top of the Pops, which was this very popular program. The Smiths wouldn't make a video, even though it's like you've got to make a video. So it's a very difficult one. But I think with certain bands, and you mentioned REM, but there was also came to mind of people like U2 and the Police. They had these kind of managers who dealt with that side of business with ruthless efficiency, with the big bucks in their eye, and almost the band were able to be shielded by these kind of quite extreme characters or sort of very professional characters like Miles Copeland. I can't remember the REM manager, but I know he was referred to as the fifth member, I think. But I guess it's that kind of that part of the gig, isn't it, where you just have somebody who just does the business for the band.
Yeah, and we, for all practical purposes, we had Peter as that guy, as that man for us. But in a way, he wasn't a conformist. He couldn't do it either. I mean, he'd be the first one to tell you, he's a lovely guy and really great and easy to get along with, but he wasn't the guy that really bought into that shit either. Like, so we were kind of, in a way, being led down the road, and he was kind of our leader in that regard. So we were kind of, it kind of turned out we all kind of came from we ended up being from the same background, because that's kind of where he was leading us in a way. I don't know that if we'd had a Stuart Cope or a, Ian Copeland or whatever, I don't know if we had ever had someone like that, if we would have been able to do what he was able to do with the Police and that, and, bring them to that level that they got to. I think we might have poo-pooed all that right at the gate anyway, because again, I think in our own way, we were kind of above that.
Yes.
We thought that's for fucking girls, whatever. I mean, we just kind of like poo-pooed it in a way that we missed the boat.
Yes.
What I mean?
Well,
we're a little late to embrace that, and then the ideas that we had for videos were kind of, dodgy at best.
When you came to your next album, which is titled Tim, there's another track on there, Here Comes a Regular. Can you remember recording that particular track?
No, because it was done when I was not in the studio.
Right.
Paul did that live, when I was not there. I don't think anyone was there. I think, in fact, it might have only been him and Peter in the room with Tommy Early when he did that, because there were all kinds of drama and stuff that went around with that record that, it's a miracle that song even came out of it, to be honest with you. But, it was I think it was a fight or flight kind of moment, when he went and recorded that. I think he really felt like he needed to get it out of him. And he called Peter up, and they were on a bit of the outs at that point. There's a whole story behind that you could read in Peter's memoir at some point. But yeah.
Yes. So was that the kind of the moment, that album after Let It Be, was that the album that felt like things had just fallen off the wagon?
A little bit. I mean, we were touring a lot. I mean, from the moment I dropped out of school, it seemed like we were touring all the time, playing shows and building our thing. And by the time we got to recording Tim, there weren't a whole lot of extra tracks for that record, because, like I said, we were touring so much, there wasn't really a whole lot of time to write new stuff, I think, for Paul even. But
yes.
But yeah.
And were you kind of aware of bands like Green on Red coming through, and I don't know, They Might Be Giants, and those sort of, I don't know, slightly alt country bands? They Might Be Giants weren't, but Green on Red, they had that little bit of a Neil Young vibe, didn't they?
Yeah, and you know what? When we started making, Pleased to Meet Me, as when we first heard about them, because Jim Dickinson had worked a bit with them, I think, and I think that's where that all came from us. That's how they came on the radar a bit there. But I think more than anything, there was always a bit of singer-songwriter music going on in the van playlist. Like when we'd be driving to places. I mean, it got beaten to death how much we played how much I blank on his name, but it's almost like a post-traumatic stress disorder artist. Hank Williams. I mean, Hank Williams was always being played in the band to the point where it took me years to be able to listen to Hank Williams after we broke up, because it was just always on. But between that and between me hating country music for so long because of that and my mom's record collection, I'll tell you a funny anecdote about that. When my mom, when Stray Cats put out their first record, they came to Minneapolis to play a show, and they were playing at a strip bar. And I was able to get us tickets for seeing the Stray Cats at said strip bar, and told my mom, I said, Mom, I got tickets for the Stray Cats. She was liking the single that she'd heard on the radio. And I said, I can get us tickets, but you got to take me because it's at a strip bar. It's at Duffy's. And so my mom takes me to see, the Stray Cats at a strip bar, and forever changes mom. Mom just gave up on Conway Twitty, all that crap, all about Stray Cats. So much so that when I lived in LA, she'd come out and visit me, and we'd go see Brian Setzer's orchestra and stuff and watch all the dancers. It's a funny connection I have with my mom. But
that's fantastic. Yes.
But I throughout, the years of traveling around with the Replacements stuff, there was always country music and Bob Dylan and just different things of the singer-songwriter nature that were always a part of it. It was always part of Paul's background. It was always part of mine just because I was there.
Yes.
And it seeped into my DNA. But it was always kind of present. And this record that I just did, it's really not anything different in one way or the other than anything I've done in terms of style wise. It's just that I did it more stripped down. This Cowboys and Campfire is way more stripped down to the basic songwriter elements in a way. It's like, Bash and Pop records or even Replacements records. A lot of those records, the songs started on acoustic guitar, a lot of them, or electric guitar in a basement somewhere. So it's not all that different. It's just the way you approach it. And so even when you go back to listen to, later Replacement stuff, you can hear some of that singer-songwriter stuff kind of coming through more as we got older and stuff. But the way we, wrote, the way Paul wrote, etc., that kind of always stuck with me. And so this record that I did, just to cut to it, is more of a stripped down version of, the same thing I've always been doing, which is, writing songs, whether I turn it into a rock song or whatever. A lot of them always still start off on an acoustic guitar. You speed them up, you put them to an electric guitar amp, whatever. They start off the same way. This is just closer to that nucleus of when the song started.
Yes. So with the new album that you've done with, this is with Chip, isn't it?
Yeah, Chip Roberts. Yep.
When did you start writing and sort of thinking of doing this as a sort of an album? Was that something that was kind of started during that dreaded lockdown period, or sort of post?
Way before that. I met him 15 years ago. He's the uncle of my second ex-wife, if you will. And so I moved to Philadelphia area when second ex-wife gets pregnant with little one, and meet Uncle Chip. And he and I become real tight friends quick. Both, he hadn't played guitar in a while at this point because he'd had a neck injury, but I got him playing guitar again, and we just kind of hit it off really well. So cut to, I'm traveling with Guns N' Roses, a lot, living in Philadelphia when I'm not on the road with them, but I set up shop in his basement of his house. I finished up a solo record called One Man Mutiny there, where he helped, he played on some of the tracks and helped write some of that. And then, we continued to write and play together on some of the stuff that ended up being that second Bash and Pop record that I did. And during all this time, when I had downtime, when I wasn't on tour with Guns N' Roses or Soul Asylum, he and I would just get in the van and go play backyard shows or whatever, for fun. And,
Yes.
it started to turn into a thing where we were making money at it and starting to having fun with it. And it was really low maintenance. It's like, of the gigs to play, these are my favorite because they really are fun to just play to the fans, and you don't have all the other bullshit to deal with.
No,
So
you don't have so much gear to try and set up.
Exactly that, and a myriad of other things. So him and I have been doing this for years. And so when the lockdown happens, when we really kind of started to put the finishing touches on this record, basically. And coming out of that, I mean, we would have put this record out last fall if I hadn't walked away from Fat Possum Records with it. We just had a difference of opinions of what should happen. After they had been with me nurturing this thing up to the end of the cycle, to the point where we're just going to put it out, they changed their idea of what they wanted to be, and I didn't agree. So I walked away from it. And so hence we put it out with Cobra Side and did it on our own this spring.
Yes, blimey, that's quite a drama. I think was it Fat Possum you said? Was that R.L. Burnside? Was he on that label?
I do believe, yeah.
I do believe yes, because on with your the one man mutiny, this is kind of a much more of a rock sound, isn't it? This is a kind of much more of a kind of a bigger production. So basically the songwriting is the same, but sometimes you'll go for the rock side, and this one you just think, let's keep it stripped down, keep it basic.
Basically, yes. That's in a nutshell. That's kind of what this record represents in a way. Plus it has a lot more input from Chip in the musical department than my solo records would. A lot of times I get sort of focused on a thing, on how I want to be, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's usually just all me. I with Chip, we kind of have a good partnership in that regard, where we've worked together on most everything in a productive way. Yeah.
Yes, and with the songs, are quite a lot of them autobiographical? I know everyone would ask you that, but is there quite a lot of your own self in that, in those feelings?
maybe a little bit, maybe not. No, to be perfectly honest with you, some of it intrinsically is autobiographical, but a lot of times I stretch it to include other storylines of other stories I've heard or whatnot. I try to, in my songwriting, I try to be as inclusive as possible, so people that listen to it can either relate one way or the other, or not really, I suppose. But I try to lure them in by, everyone's got some similar kind of baggage that, that I might be writing about or whatever, and I try to keep it our story, much.
Yes, absolutely. And did you enjoy sort of bringing in other instruments like the ukulele and sort of other kind of percussion?
Yeah, I've always messed around with different instrumentation. What was really cool, that it really wasn't until the very end when we're mixing it that we realized it was really something special, was the string section in Hey Man. When Chip and I sat down after we got the mixes back from our buddy Justin, who mixed it, we sat down, listened to the record top to bottom, and when Hey Man came on, we just kind of looked at each other and went, whoa, like, we did that, like, that's us, like, whoa, cool. Like, we kind of blew our own minds with that after we kind of walked away and came back. So kind of a special moment. And for all practical purposes, if no one ever bought this goddamn record, we still have that moment together that meant a lot to us. And that's kind of, the end of the day, really, that's all you get. I mean, if you're lucky enough to be successful at this, I've been lucky enough to be successful at it one way or the other since I was a kid. But if you're lucky enough to have that moment where you're sitting with your songwriting partner and both look at each other like, wow, you're kind of blowing each other's mind grapes a little bit with what you've done. It's like, we've got that. That's better than a payday. I mean, that's the best gift you can get from it. And I've gotten that with Chip on several records now, and most importantly, this one.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it does sound, I've really enjoyed listening to it. But I've also enjoyed listening to some of your earlier work as well, which is sort of goes back, for decades, really. So your sort of ability to keep going is quite impressive, because the one thing I've noticed doing all these interviews is that most people get to a point where they think, I just can't do this anymore. But your energy and enthusiasm seems to keep bouncing along. Do you have a certain personality type that can just kind of brush things away or kind of keep rolling on?
I must, because before I got on the phone with you, I was stressed out about a certain thing, about what I do, about some shows coming up that I may change. But ultimately, I have a drive, an inner drive, and I think you're always chasing that moment that Chip and I had. I'll be forever chasing that moment again. I'll be forever chasing the moment when I played on Stephen Colbert's TV show and with Bash and Pop. You're always kind of like, that was such a cool moment. You always want to have it again. And a lot of times what happens is you don't have that moment again. You have something else that's different, but another moment. And so because I'm still in the experimental phase of all this. I don't really know what the fuck I'm doing. I don't have a direction. I don't have a direction. I'm going to make a disco record. I'm going to make a country record. I don't have any of that crap. I just do it on the fly. And it's always kind of like opening up a Christmas present when I'm onto a new song. Like in the middle of the night last night, I woke up and was like, I had this piece of a song that I've been messing with, and now I had another piece in my sleep that I'm going to put together today. And you're always chasing those bits where, you want it. The outcome is like you're chasing this grand moment that sometimes it's a fart in the elevator, or it just turned into something really special that may be only special to you, but I got that, and that doesn't go away. Like I'll be doing this till I'm dead.
Yes.
Because I just have that drive, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I get. Did you see the Beatles film, the one that Peter? God, I can't remember his name. Is it Jackson? Who did all those mega movies? But he did Let It Be, didn't he?
Right.
The recording of the Beatles going into the studio without anything and having to record an album, and just seeing that creative process. I just wondered if you'd seen that film or that 8 hours. It was only 8 hours. It's in 3 or 4 sections. I just wondered how you kind of, if you had seen it, how you kind of related to the way that they sort of just started a song and how they developed it.
I haven't seen it, funny enough, but from what you're describing already, I can say that's exactly it. Like when I'm off the phone with you, I'm going to eat my lunch and I'm going to go out to my studio and monkey around with some stuff. And that's basically what I'll be doing, is I'll be chasing parts to a song and throwing stuff together. I might come home empty handed. I might come home with something that's really exciting. And again, as long as I still enjoy it. And this is where you get your head chopped off one way or the other. If you really mean it and you keep doing it and you keep chasing it, you're going to do it to your dead. I mean, that's just kind of the way it is. And if you just give up on it, then what are you going to do? So I don't have anything else that has my inspiration, like writing songs and playing music. I still like performing, whether it's a backyard or a fucking coliseum or a stadium. I don't really care. I like what I do and I enjoy it still. So as long as I've got that in me, I'll keep playing too,
Yes. And with just going back after your replacements, you're in, is it Bash and Pop? That was formed by you, wasn't it, in 92? Was that was that an experience and a chap that you felt really positive looking back on it as a sort of way to break away from the replacements?
Yeah, I mean, to be frank about all that, we knew at the end of the Don't Tell a Soul tour. We knew because we've been talking about it on the bus and all this stuff for a long time, of that whole touring cycle, that Paul really wanted to get more involved in the producing part of it, really wanted to kind of mess with some different textures and do different things. And we knew that pretty much All Shook Down was going to be our last record, one, and knew that he was really going to take more of an active role in kind of guiding that record. And I was kind of like, hey man, I'm totally cool with that. Have anyone you want to play bass on it, all that stuff. The Stones did it. Why wouldn't we do it? That kind of mentality went to it. If you want to have strings on a thing, you want to have this, that, let's do all the stuff you want. And I was very supportive of that. I don't know that Chris was as supportive of that, because I think he didn't like the idea of someone else playing drums one way or the other. I didn't really have that. I had more of the support of like, yeah, whoever, man. Even though when push came to shove, I kind of pushed myself back into it and played bass on a couple of things that just were not happening. I just kind of said, that's great. You got John Nett playing bass on it, but that's not that's no, give me the bass. You know, I took over for a few things and stamped them in. And it's like, okay, now it's a song that works. But you know, at the end of that cycle, going into All Shook Down, I was already writing that bash and pop record and other things around it. So by the time that record was done, we knew two things. We knew we were going to tour behind it. I knew Paul was going to go solo, and I knew I was going to make a bash and pop record or a record with a band. I hadn't thought of bash and pop yet, but we both knew we were going to go our separate ways, and it was time, and it felt right. And I was confident enough with what I was doing to turn it into the record company. And they said, yeah, we'll pick up the option. And they supported me making the record. They gave me the money to make the record, and then they just left it to me to go from there. They didn't really do a lot of promoting on that and picking up from there. But we both knew before, pretty much, that All Shook Down was going to be our probably last record, and that we're going to move on different ways. We've been talking about different things already at that point.
And as you've sort of already been sort of recording for so long and been in sort of playing music and seeing different trends, how was it for you? Because in the UK, that late 80s, there was the sort of the rise of ecstasy and the dance scene, and then there was the Seattle grunge scene. But as a musician, how do you cope with those kind of like, my God, there's a whole new wave of a new scene, and how do you kind of try and keep interested or relevant and keeping your own kind of fans going, or your people interested in you?
That's a really good question, because I went from very much, the grunge period was way above my head. I didn't get any of it. I thought it was just sort of, flannel shirt and metal is what I really referred to it as.
Yes.
And it still, even to this day, still sounds like that to me. I never got on with it. It wasn't until after the kind of grunge thing died down that those bands were doing other things that I kind of was like, oh, that's interesting. That's kind of cool. But the whole heroin, sort of metal alternative mishmash really was like, to me. But having said that, I mean, I went from the Replacements, who we never really tried to pick up on other genres that were becoming famous. We didn't like try and become a disco band because that's what was all the rage. We didn't really try and do it, but we did acknowledge it, and in some ways pull ideas, somewhat, to kind of incorporate them where it seemed like they worked, or where we felt comfortable and liked the vibe. Like, there's a song like, Ask Me Questions on Don't Tell a Soul that, was really trying to be like a disco song in a way. And I don't funk slap, and I never did. That became kind of a thing where we tried to incorporate different things, and it didn't work. Tried too hard on that, in fact. But I kind of, when the Replacements broke up, I started listening more to what was going on, not in a way of like, I want to be like that or like this. I was starting to listen to things that were interesting about, say, the grunge bands, Nirvana, and all these things. Listening to it, but really, what really got me kind of going was after that, like Queens of the Stone Age, when they came about, blew my head off. I mean, that was like, that's fucked up, and it was cool and musical still, but really like wacky. Like I told you, I got turned on to Captain Beefheart at a really young age. That kind of meshing of textures and sound and kind of beaten up music. I started getting into different things like that, and sort of, not trying to be like anyone, but it started to come into my mind. So I never really felt like emulating any of this stuff, but started to, appreciate and take and get inspired by different bands, textures, and genres and stuff like that. It's hard to not, when it's it's thrown in your face so much, and you can't help but find pieces of even the worst crap out there. There's pieces of just about everyone's music out there that's something tangible about it that I might find.
Yes, but there was the kind of those other bands or artists like, is it Uncle Tupelo? You know, those kind of old country music started to appear as well. Did you start sort of being kind of intrigued with some of those kind of sounds and artists and sort of lyrics?
Strangely, no. I mean, I liked Wilco right out of the gate, and Jeff Tweedy and all of that. We played shows with Uncle Tupelo, and I don't remember them. I don't remember anything about them, to be honest with you. But that doesn't mean anything. That whole no depression scene, again, it was the same to me as like the grunge scene. And you kind of, and where I come from, you got to kind of put yourself in my shoes. We were coming up in a hardcore rock scene as the Replacements. We were only playing our stuff really fast. We weren't trying to be a hardcore punk band. We didn't have the tattoos. We weren't really part of that skinhead angst, angry young man thing. We just happened to play our songs really fast. So we never fit that genre, but we were kind of thrown into that a bit. Growing up in different things like, watching different genres, we never really stole from any of that stuff. And so whether it was the grunge period or the no depression scene, that stuff was, Lori Barbero put it perfectly. It's like sleepy music for tired people. That's how what she referred to it as. What's always stuck in my head is like, that's what a lot of that crap sounded like to me. It was sleepy music for tired people, but it also had its own place, and it had a whole genre that I didn't understand. I got bored by it and thought it was really just boring music. I still liked upbeat pop. I mean, I like pop music, by and large. From
Yes.
One of my favorite bands growing up was the Squeeze. I love them a lot. Saw them many times, and
Yes. Up the Junction was a classic, really.
Totally.
Till for Cats, we loved them really. And when you were on your next band, Perfect, you were on a label called Medium Cool Records, weren't you?
Yeah.
So how did was that Peter's label again?
Yeah, it was his label. I can't remember how he ended up merging that with New
So was
West.
Peter kind of, he wasn't British then, because that's kind of, Medium Cool was I thought it was a label that had all these kind of quirky indie bands from the UK.
Don't really know a lot about that aspect of it, but no, Peter's from Minneapolis. Again, I mean, he was always into different things and good quality. I mean, good. I mean, he's as one of those people, it's surprising he never played an instrument. He's such a musical lover. I've met a few of them that music is so much a part of their, I mean, they breathe it, live it, feel it every moment of every day. He's one of the few people I've met. Seymour Stein was another one. Equally interesting people in that regard, although Seymour Stein, did more and became more successful and all that than Peter ever has. But that's those kind of people that really bring a lot to the table because they live and breathe it. And when they tell you something's great, you got to check out this band here, and throws it on the record player. You listen. I mean, you know that if Peter likes it, I got to listen because there's something about it. And more often than not, it would be a true thing. And so Seymour Stein, Peter Jesperson, a friend of mine, Laurel Stearns, who I know from back in the day, Kelly Spencer, another friend of mine from back in the day, just people that really, music is their whole life, but they never were musicians.
Yes.
Yeah. So, that's my tirade about Peter and Medium Cool and all that.
He sounds like a legend. Yes.
So, he's totally a legend. Yeah.
And you work with the producer Jim Dickerson as well for the album.
Yeah.
Days a Week. Did he bring a lot to the the recording?
Yeah. Jim brought a lot to the session, and he, Memphis brought a lot to the session. He'd worked, his work with Big Star probably had a lot to do with why we were there, because we loved the Big Star stuff at that point. We're getting turned on to it at that point, I suppose. And he'd done a lot of things. He was a bit cantankerous and a bit of a curmudgeon, but super interesting. Had played with a lot of greats, and He had stories for days. But also, a great producer in that he had all that going for him. He knew how to he knew how to put the right pieces into place to make you sound good. He would take care of the producing part and tell the stories and keep you interested and do all this stuff. But yeah, it was a great. And what I got out of that is I still got Luther Dickinson and Cody Dickinson as my good buddies. So
yes, well, that's amazing. That's amazing. Were you a bit amazed when you got the call to join Guns N' Roses, sort of 97, 98?
it was funny how that even happened. My friend Josh Fries was playing drums for them at that point. He was already in it, and Duff had quit, and Josh was at a rehearsal hall that I was rehearsing at with my band Perfect, and he was like, "You should come check it out. Maybe come out and jam with me. We don't have a bass player right now." I was like, "Come play," and I was like, "Yeah, whatever." So I learned up a few songs, and I went out there and did it more as a laugh on a lark, just to see what was going on, see what this all about. And I went out and played, and basically got the call the next day, "You want to join the band?" I was like, "Well, that sounds kind of weird," but I, talked to Axel about it, and um, that he was going to continue on as Guns N' Roses without Slash, Duff, Izzy, because this was what he does. This is I got the name. I'm fucking still Guns N' Roses, and I'm doing this. I was like, that's pretty ballsy. I'm in. I thought, fucking nothing more punk rock than that. He means it. He's the voice behind it, and he really wants to continue on one way or the other, and just has different ideas about what it should be than those guys. And I kind of bought into it. And for 17 years, I bought into it.
Yes, and that was amazing. Did that kind of set you up for life? Did that experience? I mean, was that, something that you thought, thank God for that, that was my pension plan, or does it not work like that?
It definitely didn't work like that. It was a great experience. I've got nothing but good things to say. It was great, and it did. It was a really good move for me. It was a many lessons learned, good and bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you, I mean, with the tour, you did tours with them. I mean, was that kind of on a scale which you'd never experienced before? Was there something kind of quite like, God, this have to pinch yourself to think I'm going out as Guns N' Roses?
I never bought into it. I pretty much was very aware that I was the odd man out in the whole scenario. But that I brought something to the table. I knew I brought something to the table, but I really did. I was aware that I'm the odd man out. I even tested it early on. I'd get off stage and I'd walk right to the middle of the crowd, right to the back door, and see if anyone ever, and no one ever, caught me and, noticed me walking by. It wasn't until I left the band and Slash and Duff came back that I'd walk through the crowd and people go, "Hey, Tommy, hey, Tommy." And that's a true story. I saw them twice. After they got back together with those guys, with a friend of mine. In both places, I got recognized more in the audience watching them play than when I was in the band.
Yes, because you sort of did quite a lot with the album that came out, didn't you?
Yeah.
Was that, what was that kind of what were those sessions like?
They were bananas. It was really, I mean, one of my greatest takeaways from all that really was being sort of forced to write with 5-6 other people that all come from completely different backgrounds, have different egos and capabilities that they bring or not to the table. But coming up with a record out of that was a miracle. And it was a really great learning experience for me. I think it was probably a great learning experience for everyone. And the one thing that really came out of that no one really noticed or knows is that Axel really is a great producer for that. He made sure that everyone had a bit of equity in every song, because I think maybe if I may project here, I think one of the problems with a band like Guns N' Roses originally was that everyone wants their song to be sung by Axl. Everyone wants their song to be this. And so it was his thing. If I got to sing your song, you got to play on his songs because I want to sing his song. It's like there was a whole game that had to be played about that. And I think with us, when it was just him and this whole new cast of characters, like he made everyone have a little at stake in every song, so that we'd all want to play each one's song.
Yes.
It was a whole thing, and there was a true producer in there that made that happen.
Yeah, it must have just been I mean, your reflections on that must feel quite interesting. And like anything in life, at the time you're just in it, but then as the years pass, you think, oh, that was quite a chapter. That's
Totally. I totally look back like that.
That's amazing. But you also managed to sort of layer it with with a period with Soul Asylum as well. So were you just very good at keeping a diary at this stage of sort of what commitments you had at certain places?
I mean, Guns would go out for long periods of time and then be on hiatus for long periods of time. And when Carl Mueller passed from Soul Asylum, it just worked out. We'd all grown up together. I know those guys from, high school. I went to high school with Dave. So just, having that background with those guys, it was like, they wanted me to play. I was like, sure, I can only play, when Guns is on hiatus. And it just sort of worked out that way for like 5-6 years,
Yes. And then when those kind of came to an end, this is where did you feel like, that's it, I'm going to really focus on my solo career now. I'm not going to, unless some brilliant offer comes along. Did that feel quite a new chapter when, sort of from 2011?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I had to walk away from Guns for personal reasons, going through a nasty divorce and all this stuff. And I had a toddler that needed me to take care of her. It was good for me to call it at that point, but obviously it was a great thing that I did, because it forced Axl to go be an AC/DC for a while, one way or the other. That had nothing but great things for him. I mean, that was a great move on his part, but also I think he got a lot out of that. I'd be interested to hear him talk about that someday, down the road when he reflects on that, because I think him being a member of someone else's band for the first time, as opposed to everyone being a member of his band, I think he probably couldn't have slipped by him without going, wow, so this is what it's like,
right,
being someone else's band, So it was kind of a cool thing. And then, obviously it pushed them back to, Duff and Slash. And I think that's great. I think he owes me a cup of coffee over that one, actually. But I look back at it, and it was a good time for me to start focusing on my own stuff, then.
Yeah. So when you were the album that we mentioned, One Man Mutiny, was that kind of a feeling of like, right, that's it, a new chapter, we're going to start a new page on this one?
Well, that was actually, I was still in the midst of being in both bands when I put that one out. That was that was the side project, really. But it really, I mean, I meant it and was aiming to make a decent record and stuff. But yeah, that was, it was a side project to what I was doing all, in my day.
Yes, absolutely. And I know this seems like a long time ago, but when lockdown came around at the beginning of this decade, did that give you an opportunity to sort of take stock and kind of reflect about how you're going to tackle this next period of life?
I not really, because I really, like so many of us, I actually kind of got dark and kind of depressed, and I forced myself to do things in the studio to just kind of not lose track, because we were almost done making we were more than halfway done with making the Cowboys and the Campfire record during that lockdown period. It was really like I had to force myself to kind of stay into it, because I had, it was so dark for everyone. But through that, came on the other side of it, and saw the light, and that's when we really so put the finishing touches on things, once we came out of that dark tunnel of COVID.
Yes.
And it took a long time to finish that record up, because of my personal things going on, and because of Chip's personal things going on, moving and all these different things. So
yes. So once this is kind of, and you've got some live dates, have you got anything next on the horizon that's kind of bubbling away in the background?
Well, not that I know of, but I'm starting to, we're just starting to kind of tour behind this record. But as I say that, like I said earlier, it's like I'm going to go to the studio and start working on some new stuff. I don't know what it's going to be for me, any number of the other bands I work with or whatever. But I'm feeling creative right now, so kind of a good thing. I can tour and go play shows, and I can go in my studio and I can be creative and come up with stuff. It's kind of a good time for me right now.
It's quite funny because there's a lot of interviews I've been doing with people who suddenly, after years of being in different bands and different scenes, have now sort of become a duo of some description. It's like, it is the rise of the duo, isn't it? And I mean, it's I think it just keeps life simple, like the writing, the recording, then you do the tour. It's like, yeah, this one works quite well. We can keep an eye on how much it's going to cost and make sure that it's not going to get too messy. And, we can just.
Exactly. It's a very low maintenance, agreeable way of doing this. I mean, I'm always going to enjoy performing one way or the other, but it isn't the easiest thing to be doing at this particular juncture in my life. But as long as I enjoy it, I'll still go out and do it. But I get a good mix of, I'm going to go be creative today. I'm going to do some shows this weekend. And
with the live shows you've done recently, do you sort of mix other periods of your life in the set?
I do. Even with the Cowboys and the Campfire, I include some of the other songs Chip and I've written together that were on either Bash and Pop or my solo stuff. So I tour at the moment. I tour with Cowboys, which we've added an upright bass player, Chops, who played on the record as well. We've added him to the lineup, so there's three of us. We still travel pretty small scale, and do our little shows. But on the other side of that, I might work up another Bash and Pop record. I never know. I like being able to do different things. So, I just kind of, as long as I feel like being creative and I've got enough gas in the tank, I'll do whatever, whatever feels good.
And if you could have just whispered something to your 16-year-old self starting out, is there anything in particular you'd have gone, oh, yes, that would have been a good thing to have been told, even if you ignored it?
Yeah, wow. A lot of things. None of them I can really repeat right now, but, it isn't an easy way to live. By all accounts, people go through life, having day jobs and working in particular fields where they've got a schedule and all this, that, and the other thing. When you're a professional musician, one way or the other, you're kind of making it up as you go along. And very lucky for me that I'm capable of still going out and making a living at this.
Yes.
I don't know what I would be, doing if I weren't able to make a living at this. I'm sure, because there was a couple of times when I actually had jobs where I was broke and I had to get work, and those actually were times when I really flowered because I wasn't leaning on my music to make a buck, that kind of thing. But I'm very lucky to be able to do what I want and how I want to do it, and I get lucky that way.
Yes, absolutely. Well, look, Tommy, thank you ever so much. This has been amazing, and I'll forward this interview to I think it's Gary, isn't it, who's sort of set this up. Dear old Gary. Yep. We love Gary. Yeah. But yes, well, thank you. Well, go and hope you have a nice lunch and have a lovely day. And yes, and hopefully the smoke won't be too bad for your lungs.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. You have a great rest of your day also. We'll see you down the road.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks again for the album. It's been brilliant.
Cool,
Take care. See you. Bye-bye. And that was me in conversation with Tommy Stinson. I will give you the link below in the notes. A massive thank you to Tommy with his new album that has just come out, which is titled Cowboys in the Campfire. Has a new single as well called Dream. So that's available here, there and everywhere as an album, CD and digital download as well. Anyway, check it out. If you want to contact me, this is David Eastaugh, the C86 Show. You can on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, just do C86 Show and send me a message. Make it positive and groovy. Life's too short. I just don't need any negative vibes, man. Also, all these interviews have been archived. That's true. You can find those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. Just do C86 Show and you will find them. There's a lot of them. So enjoy. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.